Hi, everybody. Welcome. Happy Tuesday. We're so happy to have you join us for another amazing chat with Power to Fly. I'm really excited to introduce you to our speaker and get started with our questions today. But before we do that, I just want to go over a couple quick housekeeping items for anybody who might be new to our Power to Fly events. So my name's Meg. I am part of Power to Fly's virtual hosting team. I am super excited to see so many new as well as returning faces. And I want all of you to know that today's event is all about you. It's about our participants, our attendees, our community members. We want to make sure that you all get as much out of today as you came for. So we very much encourage participation. You can do this in a couple different ways. Like I said earlier, you are always welcome to turn your cameras on if you would like. You're more than welcome to come off mute and ask a question. Or if you would like to, you are also welcome to do so by asking a question in the main chat. Now, if you have any kind of privacy concerns or anything, no sweat, you can still participate. All you have to do is make sure that you stay on mute the entirety of today's recording, and you won't show up in either our live stream or our recording of today's session. And like I did say, you can always put in questions or comments into the group channel within Zoom, within that chat function. And you can also DM me. I'm more than happy to ask your question or raise your comment and keep you anonymous. Now, like I did say, today's session is being recorded. So we're currently live streaming to our YouTube channel. Hi, YouTube. As well as recording today's chat. And that's really cool for a couple different reasons. But basically, it means that you don't have to worry about taking notes or, being concerned if you miss what somebody said, because you can always go back and rewatch the recording later. So the way you're going to do that is in about 1 to 2 business days, everyone that registered for today's email, whether you joined us or not, is going to get an email from Power to Fly. And that email is going to have a link to where you can watch today's recording, where it's hosted on our website. Now, if let's say that Lisa says something today that's just so mind-blowing, you cannot wait to share it, all right? You can't wait to tell a coworker or a friend or a relative. You don't have to wait the 1 to 2 business days. You can always head over to our YouTube channel. I'll share the URL for that here in just a moment. But just know that the YouTube channel is a really great place to stay caught up with Power to Fly. I very much recommend subscribing to our Chat and Learn channel. It just makes sure that you don't miss out on great chats like today if you don't hear about them in time enough to register, or just to be a nice hub to where you can set up maybe a playlist of the videos you want to watch, all kinds of cool stuff. You can also keep up with us on various social media channels in addition to YouTube. We are at Power to Fly on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook, as well as Instagram. Really great content is shared on all of those platforms as well. And as always, our resources are free. So please feel free to take photos or video as we go, so you can share and let your community and your social group know that you are, taking part of these resources. We love spreading the news, and that way we can, not only grow our community, but get these resources and information and tips and all kinds of great stuff out to a wider audience. So like I said, please feel free to tag us or share photo or video. We would love to reshare any content that you post. Now, last but not least, before we introduce our speaker, I just want to highlight that Lisa is here today on behalf of ServiceNow. So I'm going to share a link with you in just a moment to where you can check out ServiceNow's page on powertofly.com. It's going to look much like what you're seeing in front of you right now. This is a page where you can go to learn more about ServiceNow as a company. I'm sharing that link right there. You can learn more about ServiceNow as a company. You can get caught up on some of the events that they have participated on in the past, as well as register for future events that they have scheduled with us. And you can also take a look at their jobs. Now, I'm looking at the live page right now. They've got a little over 2,800 roles posted with us, as opposed to the 2,500 that you'd see on the screen in front of you. So you can definitely take a look at those. You can sort and filter your job search within that page. But one good thing to note, especially if you are either an active job seeker but don't see anything that really applies to you, or if maybe you are not actively job seeking, but you're just kind of keeping your options open, seeing what's out there, I very much recommend that you take advantage of the follow feature that we have on our website. So at the top right-hand corner of the company page, there's going to be a big pink button. It either says I'm interested or follow, depending on the settings on your computer. So I definitely recommend that you take advantage of that. Basically, what it does is joining that follow network acts like your friend at the company. So it would tell ServiceNow that you are interested in working with them even before you fill out an application, but it's also going to keep ServiceNow on your radar. So it's going to let you know when they post new roles. So if you are especially interested in ServiceNow, or even just want to make it known that it's a company that you want to keep your eye on, definitely take advantage of that feature and join their follow network. So I'm excited to introduce you to our speaker from ServiceNow. So Lisa Wolfe is a global marketing and strategy leader with 30 years of experience helping clients gain significant value out of game-changing technology and helping to land successful digital transformations. Now, Lisa is an expert at driving the customer conversation, telling their story, and contributing to exceeding these sales targets. Lisa started out in advanced research and development after graduating from UCSD, designing a local area network firmware in assembler, which is a lost art in the world of technology. Lisa's humbled to have worked with and learned from visionary architects designing early fiber optic networks and e-services, which is, for those of us who are not in the know, is what a cloud was called before it was called the cloud. Lisa is currently a global director of product and solutions marketing for ServiceNow, and she's honored to work with exceptional global cross-functional teams that all share an amazing passion and professionalism. We are so happy to welcome Lisa to join us in conversation today. Lisa, is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience before we jump into questions?
Yeah, first of all, great to be here. Great to be with everyone. I just want to take a little pause before we jump into our session today because I want to pay tribute to Dr. Martin Luther King. And I want to say that the world was blessed to have his civil rights leadership, his racial justice leadership, and just his profound contribution to humanity. So I know this is global, but I think he blessed the entire world. So I wanted to start there, and I'll turn it back over to you for questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. Very much appreciate it. All right. So as we go into the questions here, I just want to highlight for anybody who maybe is new here, or let's say you registered a while ago and you don't quite remember why you registered for today's chat or what we're going to be talking about. What you're seeing on the screen are some of the principal themes that we're going to try and cover in today's conversation. But something to note for all of you who took time out of your day to be here with us for our live stream and our live recording of today's event. If you took time out of your day to spend with Power to Fly, we want to make sure that that time is well worth it. So you can see in front of you some of the principal themes that we identified based on conversations with Lisa, as well as by looking at the questions that you all submitted in advance of today's session. So these are some of the things we're going to try and cover, but just know that you have the power to drive today's conversation. So if there's some area that you'd like to dive deeper into, let us know. If there is a question, maybe we submitted or we chose one of your questions to ask, and maybe we're just not quite coming at it from the right angle. You are more than welcome and highly encouraged to let us know. You can always chime in the group chat. You can DM me. So we would love to hear that feedback from you. So what we're going to try and cover are some thoughts about what spirit and integrity means in a work setting and how you can help keep those intact for yourself. Ways to discover your personal strengths as well as your passions and how those might resonate within the organization you currently find yourself in. And we're also going to discuss the importance of embracing change as a mental model to help make progress in a corporate world. So let's stop our share here and go into kind of a more like person-to-person view. So it's a little bit more, more interactive for everybody. Lisa, one of the questions that we got asked a lot, people wanted to know where your interest comes from in this. So could you share what interested you in helping others to keep their spirit and their integrity intact within the corporate world?
Yeah, sure. So I had been in the corporate world for about 10 years when my brother was tragically paralyzed in a fall. And I spent many weekends for months in the paralysis ward of a hospital. And I spent that time with my brother, but I also spent it with other folks just like you and me who were in car accidents or fell from a skylight or from disease, became paralyzed. And what happened to me was profound. I would spend weekends with people who were tragically losing part of their physical lives. But when I went into the workplace, into the work setting, I could actually see and feel the energy of people losing their spirit, losing their soul. I could see it by their energy just being depleted by how they talked and how they walked. And what I was seeing before my eyes, and this word was not used at the time, was I was watching people burn out. So I kind of experienced this again for months. And then I started to see a few people. I call these people the spirit keepers. Their energy was always intact. They weren't sort of slumping or becoming burnt out. And I said, I'm going to interview those people. I want to know what it is that gives them the essence to keep their spirit strong in a work setting. And so I did interview those people. And what I learned from them in general, obviously everyone has a unique story, but in general, what I found was those individuals that I call spirit keepers, they had developed and created purpose and meaning outside of the workplace. So outside of their job, they had something bigger. And it was always unique to the individual what that purpose and that meaning was, but they were not their job. Their identity wasn't wrapped up in their job or their career. The second thing that I learned is they kept their integrity intact. So here again, Dr. Martin Luther King says it best: our lives begin to end the day we become silent about the things that matter. And I have many examples of this in the workplace, but I remember one very early on when I first started my career, sitting in a big conference room, and somebody asked a question to a leader, and his response was very hostile to the individual. It really shut the room down. Nobody was able to ask questions. And I looked over at the person who asked the question, and they were just devastated. And I realized that the leader who had responded that way had never been confronted by any of his peers or really anyone in the environment. And I was new to the workplace and, just some whippersnapper. But I took it upon myself to take that leader aside in no position of power whatsoever. And I said, that was just not okay. That was not appropriate. And I can tell you, I have done that over and over and over again, no matter what my position is. I do it in a confidential or a very straightforward way, but it's all about your integrity and doing the right thing, because once you start to give your integrity away, you literally lose yourself. You lose your spirit. So those are the lessons I took away from what I call the spirit keepers.
I love that. Okay. So kind of transitioning from that, you talked a lot about people that kind of lose themselves into their work life or allow their personality to sort of be kind of consumed by their work. And we know that work setting has a huge impact on your energy. When we were chatting prior to this call, we had talked about it in terms of working from home versus working in an office setting. When it comes to that impact that the work setting has on our energy, do you have a preferred strategy to manage that work-life balance and work-life integration to help recharge yourself?
Yeah, let me answer that. Let me answer that a couple ways. And let me start with just your energy period. I think just maintaining your energy period requires us, and I found with me, requires me to make an appointment with myself. Literally to calendar an appointment on my calendar, just like I would a work project. It seems so much easier to prioritize our work projects over ourselves, over our very health. And it is really critical to not lose that, because as soon as you become consumed by your work, you're literally depleting your own energy that you can bring back into it or even into your life. And I do a couple things. I try very hard to get outside. My recommendation is to drop all the screens. There's tons of research on what the screens do to our brain, tons of research. There was some prescient work done a while back on a book called The Shallows. And Shelby, you should know that book called The Shallows, about how the internet actually impacts our brain. So getting outside, if you can get outside, but just getting away from all the screens and letting your mind wander. When you let your mind wander, that's the time your mind actually starts to refresh and replenish. That's where your creative ideas and solutions come from. And in our culture, in our work culture, culture doesn't value this sort of what I call downtime, but it's really the most critical time to get your energy back and get your creativity back. When it comes to this remote or hybrid or actual environment, I've had the opportunity to spend 10 years in an office in a 5x5 cube in an open setting, and more than 10 years in a virtual environment, in a remote environment, traveling all over the world, working. I've been in a global role more than half my career. And for me, the experience of working outside of an office, outside of a constrained environment, is huge when it comes to energy. I know everyone's different here, but there was a time where people would say, oh, everyone has to be in the office because that's where you get the ideas. You can sort of, this is an old idea, but stand around the water cooler and generate and spark ideas. But really, the world's global, right? So I think globally, and I've had this great opportunity again to work with people from countries all over the world. And those ideas are not sparked around a little local water cooler. Those ideas and that diversity and that big world come in when you're able to work remote. And I like to think of it working from anywhere versus only working from home, but huge difference in energy when it comes to physical human energy, intellectual energy, and not to mention the commute time that's saved, not to mention the opportunity that we have to actually integrate our work and our family lives. For many years, there was this discussion around work-life balance, almost as if work and life could be equal. And there's just no such thing. It's really work-life integration. And what I find I need to do and we need to do is really try, as the spirit keepers found, to make sure we're building and creating meaning and purpose outside of work itself.
I love that. And you're right to kind of highlight the idea of that balance, because I think a lot of us, understand it doesn't really exist, right? Everything is constantly in flux. And the idea that you would spend equal amounts of time on your work versus your personal life, knowing that your job could replace you. Like if you get hit by a bus tomorrow, your work will find someone else to do your job. But your personal life is a completely other story. So even though you might, in the aggregate spend more time at work or more time around those people, it's not nearly as impactful as you think it is. It shouldn't be something that you prioritize above your own personal needs. Okay, so like you said, kind of the advice is a little bit different when it comes to, the settings that we find ourselves in might be very different. If you are in an office versus in like a remote or a hybrid setting, does your advice change at all? Or do you think that, kind of what you've suggested really works no matter your working situation or your work environment?
Yeah, no, my advice is the same. So I remember being in an office, and that was, in my first sort of 10 years in my career, I was in an office. I was in a tiny little 5x5 cube. We did try open setting. That didn't work so well because our desks were all pushed together and everyone was always on the phone at the same time. But in those days, when I was in an office, a team of us would get together and we would carve out an hour during that day to go out and run, physically actually run or jog or walk, just to get out. And I just think that time where you don't have, where you're not just eating lunch at your desk and you're not just focused on solving the next set of 12 priorities that have come on your plate, just that downtime and that opportunity for your mind to relax and for your mind to wander, and some people call it ruminate, that's where the energy starts to shoot back in. And so no, my advice is the same, to carve that time out for yourself, whether you're in an office or wherever you are in the world.
I completely agree. I worked at a lot of different places. But the last place that I worked in an in-person role, that this was kind of built into the company culture. We had office people and we also were attached to a factory in like a warehouse setting. And so the assigned break times for the warehouse that are, OSHA mandated or whatever, also then ended up kind of trickling down and applying to the office people. So everybody at specific times during the day would get up to take their 10-minute break or their half hour for lunch or whatever. And the entire company, I thought it was the most bizarre thing the day I started, but then it seemed weird that nobody else does this. The entire company would walk outside. And even when we were in like a tiny, postage stamp size lot, they'd walk around the perimeter of the building. People would do laps literally and just like walk in groups. And it seemed really silly to me the first couple weeks I worked there. But then I realized like, no, that's actually really helpful. So like every day, regardless of, we'd stay inside when it was cold out and that kind of thing. You'd see people doing laps in the hallways. But the idea of having just 2 10-minute breaks a day where all we did was kind of just walk in the same stupid circle, but you got to talk and get outside and the whole shebang. And it was honestly really, really nice. And when you think about it over the course of the day, taking that 10 minutes, it's 20 minutes that you're not going to get back for, completing tasks, but it's also something that really kind of wakes up and refreshes your brain, even if it's just to kind of get you through the rest of the day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to jump in there and add, there's a brand new book that just came out with a ton of research called The Extended Mind. So it's The Extended Mind. And what the author did is she did research on how an environment actually impacts our thinking and impacts our mind. And I really encourage anybody that's interested in this topic on how the physical environment actually affects your ability to think more broadly or to come up with different creative solutions or what happens to your energy in your brain. I encourage you to get this book, The Extended Mind, because it just goes along the lines that you're talking about of getting outside. Somebody knew how critically important that was.
Yes, absolutely. All right. So I'm going to grab a link for y'all to that book that Lisa mentioned. And while I'm doing that, we keep moving on questions. We actually did get one that came in the chat that I thought was really interesting, touching on the first question you had answered. Gina wrote in saying, someone spoke to me last week at work about the challenge of speaking truth to power. How can you do this and still live with that integrity? Lisa, do you have any thoughts on this? I think it's a great question, right?
Yeah, it's a great question. And let me first start by saying it's a skill. And when I say it's a skill, that means that you learn it over time and you develop it over time. I would say in my career, I've had to do this several times. And I don't do it in a setting where there's anybody else or me and the person I'm trying to share that the feedback with, no matter what their level. And I think about it ahead of time, how can this feedback, how can the person, I'm going to use the person that I talked about when I very first started my career, and somebody in the conference room asked a question and his answer was so hostile that it really shut down all the questions. So I think about the approach, how I'm going to communicate that really shut the entire conference room and everybody in it down. That's just not okay. I think what you have to do, and this is difficult when I say this, is you have to make a choice. You have to take a stand. And sometimes your job is on the line. When you take that stand, you have to say to yourself, it's okay. My integrity in this situation is more important than the ramifications here. Because every time you bargain away your integrity and say, and again, in that situation, if I wouldn't have gone forward and expressed that it's not okay to completely flatten the person that just asked the question, and in fact, all the other questioners, you lose a little bit of yourself, of your soul, of your spirit all along the way. It's hard. What I'm talking about is hard. It's not easy. And it's you learn to do it over time, and you also have to be willing to take the risk of whatever the ramifications might be. which is why I said you always want to do it in the right setting, right? So that's my experience.
I like that. I like that. That's very good advice to follow. Okay, we also had one other question in the chat that I wanted to touch on. So we talked about, that importance of carving time out for yourself. When corporations or organizations don't value that downtime and instead are really focused on kind of getting the most value they can out of their employees, how can we as individuals work on setting up those boundaries that are necessary to prevent the burnout that would come, if we just followed what the company wanted us to do? What do you recommend to people who might be already in this situation and have to try and carve out those boundaries within an existing setting?
Yeah, I think we're in a interesting time now in terms of history and in terms of work over time. I think we are now in what I call sort of a peak workism or workaholism time in terms of kind of the long view of work. And COVID and the pandemic, now many people who had not been working remotely or had not been working out of their home offices before, it can make work seem like, there's even more work. So my recommendation here, and what we all need to do, is create our own boundaries. So a work environment, a company, they don't have the boundaries set up. We have to set our own boundaries. That's why I had said, put yourself on your calendar, make yourself your number one project on your calendar, and make that uninterruptible time. And it's retraining your work environment that you actually do have boundaries. If you train your work environment that you have no boundaries, that time will always be filled with more work. Work will never stop. Work will just continue to flow in. So it's up to each of us as individuals to carve that time and to create those boundaries. And now more than ever, because I think we're all sort of in a mode where if we're not careful, work could just become all consuming. And we don't want it to do that, because that's when we lose our spirit, especially.
Oh, absolutely. And you're right. We are seeing a very sharp rise in people who feel like they're kind of in that workaholic mindset. It's that transition that comes if you ever worked remotely prior to the pandemic. I think it's something that we all sort of went through, where you start off keeping good hours and then you end up working out kind of all hours of the day. And then you realize you're no longer at 40 hours a week, you're closer to 60 or 70. So yeah, I think you're right. It's one of those things you have to not only be conscious of what you're trying to achieve, but like you said, really hammer that home, teach other people about the respect that you want to see. I carve out time on my schedule for therapy. I schedule it when my therapist has available, because she's hard to get into. So sometimes that means it falls in the middle of the workday, but that's something that I mark out and I make clear, like, this is inviolate time. I can't be anywhere. I have to be at this place. I have to be doing therapy. And honestly, even just being open about that, the reasoning behind it, has really helped to drive it home for a lot of my coworkers. And it's actually sparked really good conversations about, like, oh, you take time to do this and, do this for yourself. I'm like, yeah, I don't know how else I would survive in this world without it. So yeah, you're right. Really, really setting those boundaries and reestablishing or reaffirming, what treatment you actually want.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay, because if we don't carve those boundaries out, we will be completely depleted of all of our energy in our lives and in our work. So it's really critical time to be carved out.
Yeah. We had an anonymous question that is very thought-provoking. So I don't know if we'll be able to answer it entirely. This person wanted to know, what role do you see collective action playing in creating these kinds of changes necessary for workplace culture? Unions worked really hard to get these kinds of breaks for factory workers, but unionization doesn't really come up in conversations like this. So I love this question, both from a union and a non-union perspective, when it comes to creating that cultural shift. Because as we all know, it'd be great if these things came from the top down and had that kind of support. But if they don't, then it becomes more of a thing that individual contributors, individual employees have to kind of start themselves. So do you see that sort of collective action really working outside of that union workplace culture?
Yeah, let me use an example from another company. And thank you, Shelby. This is by way of my daughter, who is a mindfulness advocate. So at SAP, SAP has a chief mindfulness officer. And they started this mindfulness initiative about 11 years ago now. And so Shelby and I interviewed the chief mindfulness officer at SAP to ask how he was able to create this collective action. And he was not in HR, he was an engineer. And he shared with us that it really was a groundswell. It was a groundswell. It started with the people on the front line. They weren't unionized, they weren't a union, but they knew that they needed the injection of mindfulness to really, again, be a mechanism and a practice and a help to keep, he doesn't use the term to keep your spirit intact. That's kind of my term. But I do think groups coming together like this, identifying the fact that, hey, we're struggling. We need a way to make sure that we put our own boundaries in place. And that sort of ground up momentum definitely can work. I see a right on SAP. Maybe that person's from SAP.
Oh yeah, looks like it. We've actually got some really good chats happening, comments and stuff happening in the chat thread. So
yeah, let me keep adding to that. So I'm not from SAP. We spoke with SAP, but I'm from ServiceNow, and at ServiceNow we also have several great groups. We also have several great groups, which are from the ground up groups that come together in community. And we have a women's group that's come together and with the goal of trying to create community, but also have these discussions of, how do we have this balance? How do we make sure that we have our boundaries in place? And again, this is all driven across ServiceNow. ServiceNow supports it, but it's the employees who came up with these ideas and these initiatives. These groups span all different areas. We have a group that represents racial justice, a group that represents women, and the list goes on and on.
Excellent. Okay. All right. So let's change gear a little bit and talk more about, kind of your own personal strengths. A lot of people wanted to know if in your career, have you ever reached a point where you felt your personal strengths became less relevant as your org changed? And if so, what did you do about this? Now, we talked last week and you were sharing a story with me about this, but I'm really interested to see what your advice looks like to this person.
Yeah. So growing up in tech, and I've grown up in tech. So tech is relentless change. So just as soon, I think of it like surfing. I've tried to surf. I've not been successful yet. But once you catch a wave and that wave comes in, that next wave of change just comes in right on top of it. So tech is not only full of change, it's acquisitions and divestitures. And again, in my early career, I was part of a very large organization of 300,000 people at the time. And we were divesting. And we were divesting over a multi-year period. And I remember one of my peers who was just really extraordinary at her job saying to me, I can't take the change anymore. I need to understand what my box is on the org chart. And I just can't have it keep moving and moving and moving because it was constant reorg. And I said to her, first, your mental model, think we're not boxes on an org chart. If you're thinking about yourself as a box on an org chart, that is something you should consider changing. And at that point, I came up with a philosophy, and I call it my water philosophy. It's a mental model that we are all water. So we're water. And when you think of yourself as water, water is actually the most powerful element in the universe. So water never stops running. Water will wear down boulders that are in the stream. Boulders and rocks and everything can change in the stream of your water, but your water keeps flowing and your water finds crevasses and your water never stops. And instead of thinking of ourselves as individuals as a box on an org chart, if we think of ourselves as water and we keep finding a way to bring our strengths and our passions to our work, it doesn't matter what the organization is around us, we're still going to be contributing our best and we're still going to keep flowing. Now, I'm just going to go back to strengths, finding your strengths. So it used to be a time probably 20 years ago where there were traditional professions, right? You were going to go to medical school or maybe be an attorney or maybe be a computer scientist or an accountant. And those traditional professions aren't as common anymore. And you don't just, graduate from high school or college and know that's exactly what I want to do. It's very uncommon. So you sort of have an idea of where you want to go and what you're passionate about. And if you can find a job and make a living in that area, that's great. Most people end up in a job as their first job. And there's many activities in that job. And what they learn and they find is, I'm going to oversimplify and say, maybe there's 10 activities in that job and 3 you just love and the rest you don't. Grab those 3 activities, grab them and say, okay, these 3 activities I resonate with, and start to carve more of your work around the 3 activities that your strengths align with. And that comes over time. You just don't wake up one day, or if you're lucky, maybe you do, and you know exactly that I want to be XYZ. That's possible. I was a natural oil painter. I had no interest whatsoever in computer science, but I decided that I needed to actually get a paycheck. So you get into a role and you find that where your strengths and the activities in that role resonate, and you try to create more of that throughout your career. So it's trial and error. Your first job might not be a perfect fit, but it really is trial and error. I hope that helps.
No, I think you're right. I think that is a very good way of looking at it. Especially, I love the water analogy because you're right. Water manages to find a path and it finds a way forward. And just because that way forward is, just because you're kind of feeling that drive forward, either because of time or just natural movement within your job, just understand that there are a lot of ways to get where you want to go. It's not just the one path. And like you said, because of kind of the resilience and the beauty of water, you get to keep trying and keep searching and keep, trying to find workarounds to get where you want to go. All right. So let's kind of go back and touch on this idea of burnout. Do you have any practices that we can try as individuals to address, address some of the stressors or address some of the issues that contribute to that burnout, hopefully before it happens, but, what practices do you recommend for this?
Yeah, so I'm going to do something we didn't plan, we didn't talk about. It's totally off.
I love it. Yay!
Our discussion. But I have to call on somebody in the audience. So Shelby, are you there? You went off camera. Are you there? Are you eating breakfast or lunch or dinner? Hi. So Shelby, because she's asking about practices that we can actually do during the day and integrate to try to avoid burnout and keep our energy intact. Shelby, would you mind actually putting this whole group through one conscious breath? And you're on mute, Shelby, if you're talking.
I just gave you the opportunity to unmute, Shelby. So you should be able to come off mute.
Well, hello, I'm Shelby. I'm Lisa's daughter. My passion is mindfulness and meditation practices and learning how to incorporate different calming practices and practices of play throughout your day in order to keep a resilient spirit and to hold on to your worth. And mindfulness has been so transformative for me. Just incorporating that throughout my day has been huge for my personal mental health and my own resilience and my attention as well, and my emotional regulation. So one thing that has been proven by science is watching your breath, and that can be extremely beneficial for a number of reasons. There's been a lot of neuroscience research coming out of Harvard recently that shows watching your breath for even 2 to 5 minutes in the morning will allow you to task switch more efficiently. So say you're writing an email or you're creating a presentation or, doing whatever, and then you get a text message or something pops up, you get a message, your attention is going to go to that message, and then you are going to have to use a lot of subconscious mental energy to pull yourself back into the task that you're doing. And that itself is going to cause burnout and just deplete your energy. And, this society, this culture of multitasking is leading to attention deficit disorder and all of these issues. So it's been proven that watching your breath is a great practice that you can incorporate throughout your day, even for a couple minutes, and it has huge benefits.
I
So
love that.
yeah, it's been so awesome. I love it, and it's so beneficial, and it's so simple as well to just kind of reground yourself and reground your nervous system and kind of communicate with your nervous system as well through your respiratory system. But I can lead us through one conscious breath if
Yeah, please.
Yeah, please.
Please.
awesome.
We
All
have
right.
an hour, so we have time.
All right, everybody. So to start with this conscious breath, find a comfortable seat. Give everybody a minute just to get comfortable. And allow your hands to rest comfortably in your lap. Gently close your eyes. Begin to relax your face muscles, your jaw, your forehead. Drop your shoulders. Begin to settle into awareness of the body and the breath. Just notice how you're sitting. And bring a feeling of gratitude for this wonderful community and this conversation that we're having. Now, I would like to take one collective conscious breath with you all. So take a deep inhale through your nose and exhale through your mouth. Let's take another deep inhale through your nose and exhale through your mouth. You can close your lips and return to your natural breath, breathing in and out through your nose. And when everyone's ready, you can open your eyes and return to the moment. Thank you all for participating.
Thank you for leading us.
Thank you, Shelby. That was great. I love that.
Thank you. Yeah, that has been something that is so simple and has been so beneficial for me. And I know has been proven to be so beneficial for everybody, and just including a little bit of a conscious breath throughout your workday. I think is a great way to start to kind of be aware of how you're feeling, what stress you might be experiencing that's not fully surfaced yet, that could be, compounded and could lead to burnout.
Well, it's a really nice way to kind of remind yourself or ground yourself back into what your body kind of wants naturally, is that calm and that stasis.
Exactly.
Because you're right, it's very easy. I mean, even just sitting here, if you'd asked me before today's session, like, are you stressed at all? I'd be like, nah, it's fine, It's the thing
Yeah.
I do every day. But then like going through that breathing exercise, I was like, oh, wow. Okay. So maybe I am a little bit stressed today. Maybe I do need to slow down a little bit and really kind of recenter myself before trying to tackle the rest of the stuff I have to do after today's chat. So yeah, thank you for that,
Fantastic.
Shelby.
Exactly, of course. And just focusing on the present moment and just becoming aware of that and aware of like what you might be thinking about, like, what do I have to do next? What do I have to do next? What do I have to do next? Oh, like, how was that conversation with this person? What did they see from their perspective? How did they see me? Like this can all be subconscious stress that adds up. And that's a great way to just ground yourself. Also, just like getting outside, being able to stand in the sun for a few minutes. The sun is a great recharger as well. I think that's really important. What you were saying about how your former company, you guys would walk around in the sun. I think that's an walking meditation is also an awesome practice.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a little less than 15 minutes left in today's session. I want to see if we can get to maybe one more question. Lisa, do you have a preference on which one we address? I know the next one we're talking about if you feel like you need to hold back your energy in the workplace, but is there maybe a different question that you want to make sure we touch on before we leave today?
I think there is a difficult one that came in, and I think it's difficult because it's a difficult topic. But the one about somebody feeling that they're defeated, they're already defeated in their current
Yes.
role.
Yeah.
And what was my advice on
Yeah, this person had written in
person.
saying if leaving your job isn't possible, because I know, that's something that we had discussed previously, that not everyone, in fact, probably a very few number of people are resourced enough to be able to say like, okay, well, this isn't really vibing with me, so I'm going to go find something else. So if you know that leaving your job isn't possible, but you really are feeling that defeat, how can you regain your spark? Is there anything that you recommend?
Yeah, so what I recommend there is to really pull in your horizon. So I like to think about a career, the long run, as a book. So we're writing every chapter in that book, and every chapter might be a different job. It might even be at the same company, but a different job within that company, or a different company, or an entire different industry. So it's all about the mental model here, because if you're already feeling defeated, you have a defeated internal conversation going. And if you're able to change that conversation by structuring your vision as a book, I'm in this chapter, and that chapter might be 3 to 5 years long. Sort of think of your work chapters as 3 to 5 years long, and that might feel like an eternity. So if that feels like an eternity, then think about it as a month. Okay, I have this month. Pull in your horizon and just do the very, very best you can for the week, for the month. But be really clear, this is a chapter. You will get through this chapter. That helps to start to bring that feeling of defeat and turn it around, because you're taking control. The other thing, and this is hard, what I'm about to say, I know it's hard. So when I say it and it sounds easy, I know it's not, is you really need to find 2 hours a day. So I don't know how many people do social media. I recommend against social media, because it consumes hours and hours of our days and our nights and even our thinking. And if you can grab 2 hours away from social media, or just carve 2 hours a day during your work day, again, I know it's hard, and really spend that 2 hours on what your next chapter is going to be, what your next chapter is going to look like, and how you're going to start moving to that next chapter. I'm having this conversation right now with someone who works at a nonprofit for the UN. So they work in a nonprofit. That nonprofit works with the UN. They have been in marketing for this nonprofit for the UN their entire career, but they want to move out of nonprofit into profit. They know what they want to do. They know what their next chapter is going to be. They can see their next chapter. And they reached out to me to ask for my guidance and advice. I don't know the person. I was introduced to them, and I was happy to sort of help them understand what they needed to do to move from the nonprofit to the profit. And they started to initiate these interviews. And I had an exchange with her even this morning because she didn't get her first profit job that she tried for. Again, she's got years of experience, but I said, you've got the vision of your next chapter. It might take a lot of time. She still has to work at the same time, of course, and she's a single mom, but stick with it, stick with the focus, because if you don't stick with the focus, you won't change the chapter. And if you know that you have a next chapter and you're doing something to move that way, the feeling of defeat will go away, because you'll know that you're making progress towards it, and you'll just internally start feeling so much better. So that would be my answer there.
I do really like that. And you're right. It is, it is a situation that a lot of people can find themselves in, especially if you are kind of looking more and taking stock of your current situation, like your job or your company or whatever. There are a lot of people kind of doing that taking stock thing. So just know that you're not alone in any of this. So I really, really appreciate it, and appreciate so many of you sharing this with us. One thing that we did have a comment in the chat thread that I thought was really interesting, that this person said, there are some great suggestions, but many of these thoughts and suggestions might be easier for people of certain groups, for example, white women versus women of color. And that is a completely valid and very, very important distinction to make. This person says the consequences and repercussions are often harsher for non-white or non-cis women, which is sadly true in this country. And they had asked for suggestions on how to move forward. And I think, you've raised a really good point, which is you have to not only look at what resources you have, at your disposal, but you also have to look at the potential risks for a lot of this. And I think, that is a very good point to raise. So thank you so much for drawing that out. And I do think that, a lot of these suggestions do come from a specific point of view. But one of my favorite things about these events is that we get to talk to various people who have experienced these kinds of things in their lives, or are subject matter experts, or want to share with you, here's what I did, so don't do these things. And so I really, really, think it's important that we highlight, whoever's speaking can only speak from their personal experience, right, Lisa? We had talked about this last week. And so it's all about, at least for me, hosting a lot of these chats is about not only recognizing what I know, but also what I don't know, and where I can, bring value to people, and where we can try and help, present resources or present options for people that might feel like they don't have any.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
absolutely.
and I actually, like, especially if you are a person that feels like this advice doesn't work for you, or like this advice, maybe doesn't really take into account your own lived experience, reach out to us. Let us know that. We have our main email account is hi@powertofly.com. So we'd really be interested in hearing, do you, what kind of different perspectives do you want to hear on this? Are you somebody that maybe would want to speak to us on this? Write into us at that email address, please let us know, because we want to make sure that we are using this platform to help everyone, not just people that have the same lived experience as me, or people that look at like Lisa or whatever. Please understand that this is an issue that we understand, and we know that we don't understand the entire thing. So please feel free to let us know how we're doing in that.
Yeah, thank you for that. I do want to touch on another question that came in along those lines, but it really is, when did you have a situation where you were the first or the only? And so again, just only speaking from my lived experience. So in my early career, I started as a systems engineer, and there were very few women. There are still few women systems engineers. And I remember going out with sales reps to help close the deals and work with customers. And what I realized at that time is, well, there's a lot of money in the sales part, but there are no women. There are no women in technical sales at the time, at my early company. And I want to do that. So I asked if I could do that. And I was told, no, you're good at what you're doing. Stay as the systems engineer. You're good at coming in and helping close the deal. But I wouldn't take no. So I kept asking and asking and asking until finally I was given the opportunity. And when I was given the opportunity to sell, I was given only new business, so only competitive territory. And that competitive territory is absolute hardest. There's no customers, there's no install base. It's almost impossible. So it was almost as if, okay, you want to move into sales, go for it. With the absolute hardest territory and the biggest quota you can, go for it. And at that time, I knew, because I was the first woman in that role in technical sales in my county for a very large company. I don't mind mentioning the company, actually. It's a great company. It was what it was at the time, but it was Hewlett-Packard. And I said, I don't want to fail here, because there are so many women that will come behind me. And I don't want to fail. I want women. I want to be able to open this door for all the women behind me. And I just tripled down and worked even harder. And it was hard to make that successful. And that really became part of my mission in my work life, is to help women, to help women of color, to help those who didn't have the opportunity because the doors were closed, to help break those down. And that's why I'm here. That's why I'm speaking, because when I talked about people that are spirit keepers, it's that purpose and that meaning that keeps me going, is really helping open the door for others. And there are still very few women in these roles, but I hope they just keep charging, because there's good money to be made.
No, I absolutely agree with you. It's one of those things where if you are looking at potentially being the first or being the only in your given situation, it's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of struggle to get to that level. And then once you're there, it feels like a lot of pressure to maintain it or to live up to, whatever the standards, realistic or otherwise, might have been placed on you. So I thank you so much for sharing that story with us. All right, we don't have a ton of time left, but I wanted to make sure we revisited a little bit about ServiceNow. So what you're looking at is a questionnaire that we put to Lisa ahead of today's session, where we wanted to talk a little bit more about ServiceNow. So Lisa, in the interest of time, let's touch on your top tips for someone who's interviewing first. Are these specific to ServiceNow, or are these interview tips that you feel resonate for a variety of different employers?
I wrote these with ServiceNow in mind, but now that you asked me if these tips resonate across, I would say yes. I would say yes, they resonate beyond ServiceNow. I think it's really critical for you to come to the table and be able to articulate how you uniquely can make an impact. But you have to be able to tie the impact you can make with the top priorities of that organization. So you have to do your homework. You have to really understand what the mission and what the priorities are of the organization or the team or the specific manager that you're interviewing with. And one thing I noticed, because I actually have interviewed and interview people myself, is I'll always watch for this. So I put this out there. At the end of an interview, you always get, do you have any questions for me? The interviewer will say, do you have any questions for me? And so many times the interviewee, the person being interviewed, doesn't have an opportunity to ask the question of, I really want to know what your top priorities are. As a hiring manager, do you have 2 or 3 top priorities? I want to understand those, because I want to understand how I can help you achieve your top priorities. I don't see that question coming up a lot. And so I think it's an important question, because it connects you even deeper to that hiring manager, helps that hiring manager remember, that person was interested not only in getting the job, but interested in how they could help me meet my top priorities. So I leave you with that. And
Okay,
and before I leave you, I just want to thank Shelby for jumping in here completely unprepared and unexpected and totally off script. Thank you, Shelby, for jumping in as well.
Yes, thank you so much, Shelby. All right, so we are at the end of our time for today, but I just want to Lisa, extend a huge thank you to you. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing, so much of your own work history and your own experiences with the rest of us. I know that it's incredibly valuable to so many people. And I just want to say a big thank you to our attendees. Y'all submitted some amazing questions ahead of today's event, and even more questions during the event. It was really, really great. And I loved all of the constructive criticism we got from people. Seriously, y'all, that is absolutely invaluable to us. Let us know what you're interested in learning about. Let us know where you think we're falling short. Let us know, what more we can do, what more, what resources we can provide to you. So thank you so much to all of you for all of the time that you spent with us. A huge thank you to our YouTube subscribers as well as our watchers there. Hi, everybody. And I'm going to share a couple of links in the chat thread again before we sign out today. Just places on where you can connect with ServiceNow, more information that you can get about Power to Fly and our resources, as well as links to our archives where you can search all of our past chats as well. So thank you to all of you. I hope everyone has a wonderful and pleasant rest of your Tuesday. If you are new to us and new to Power to Fly, we are so, so happy to have seen you today and hope that you'll join us again soon. And if you are one of our frequent flyers, it was so nice to see you again, and we can't wait to see you on another chat. Like I said, have a lovely lovely Tuesday, and hopefully we'll see all of you around soon.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Meg.